Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the design, specifications, comfort, and isolation of the BQEYZ Summer. Now, when I first saw pictures of this IEM, I have to say I was I thought they looked a little bit plain, especially compared to like the Spring 1 and the Spring 2. I really thought that the metal housing with the unique colors on the Spring 2 are really, really cool. I had the green Spring 2. So again, when I saw the pictures and videos of these, and of course I know that sometimes those don't do them justice. So I did want to make sure I kind of reserved my opinion until I actually held these in my hands and saw these with my own eyes. And I also wanted to make sure that when I got them, I wanted to at least try and do my best to make sure the videos and the pictures that I took represented these well. So anyway, so now that I actually have them in front of me and held them in my own hands, have seen them in good light with my own eyes, I actually like these a lot. A lot of people were saying they're kind of plain, and I understand that. But now that I have these in front of me, I actually kind of like the understated approach they took to this design. And the build quality is actually quite nice. So now if you look at these in the light, you can actually see they're a little bit translucent. So you can actually see through the housing into the housing, and you can kind of see some of the drivers if you look really close. And as far as the overall finish of the IEM, it's actually quite nice. And they have two colors. I think there's a light blue color that you can get. I got this dark blue color, which actually has more of a purple tint to it than blue to me. So, but anyways, as you can see, the design is actually quite nice. So I like the design a lot. I don't like it as much as I like the Spring 2. I still think that the Spring 1 and the Spring 2 was a little bit cooler. But I like this too. I like it a lot. Now, as far as the shape, you can see the inside here how it has this little bit of a curvature to it, so it actually fits my ears quite nicely. The nozzle is a little on the short side, but so I did have to do some tip rolling. The tips that come with it, I had a little bit of a tough time getting the tips that come with it to fit my ears. But I have a pretty good collection of tips. I ended up using some of my spin fits. Those seem to do the job pretty well. I also tried out some foam tips that worked okay. And as you can see, of course, it has a 2-pin connection here. But as far as the design and comfort, the build, I think it's quite nice. I think BQEYZ did a good job. And again, these are only $129. So for the price you pay, the build and design, comfort, and fit are quite nice. Now, as far as isolation, these do isolate okay. Again, initially, part of my isolation issue was because of my tips. I wasn't able to achieve a good seal with the tips, but once I found the tips that worked with these, I was actually able to achieve pretty decent isolation. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. I would say it's about average. Okay, so the BQEYZ Summer has an impedance of 32 ohms, sensitivity of 107 dBs, a frequency range of 7 hertz up to 40,000 hertz. And we already talked about how it has a 2-pin connection on the IEM, 2-pin connection on the cable, and it has 3 different types of drivers. So you have a tribrid configuration. You have a 13 millimeter dynamic driver that handles the bass. You have a balanced armature driver that handles the mid frequencies, and a 5-layer piezoelectric driver for the highs. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the cable. Okay, so this cable is actually quite nice, again, especially for the $129 price. I've seen a lot of IEMs that are much more expensive that don't have a cable this nice. I love the color. It's very supple, it's soft, it's comfortable behind the ears. As you can see, it has nice little details. You have the BQEYZ logo here printed on the 3.5 connector. You also have the logo on the splitter. The chin slider works good. As you know, I'm a drummer, and that's one of my pet peeves, is a chin slider that stays tight. I actually wear these behind my head, and I drape the cable behind my back when I'm drumming. So it's very important for my IEMs to stay secure. And if this doesn't stay tight behind my head, then that can cause issues for me while I'm drumming, because I move around a lot. So this cable, I actually use it. I used these summers when I was playing drums, but I also used this cable on other IEMs as well because I like this cable so much. So the cable, again, for the $129 price is very nice. And again, as far as these ear hooks, sometimes I find these a little uncomfortable. These are not uncomfortable. This cable actually was very comfortable. Again, it lays along the back of my neck. And sometimes after long listening sessions, this can tend to maybe start bothering my ears. I know that I've heard other people also have similar issues with these types of cables that are kind of curved. These didn't bother me at all. I was able to get it tight behind my head, and that can sometimes, when I tighten it behind my head, it pushes, and there's a little bit of pressure on the cable behind my ear. But these maintained the shape really nicely and fit just perfectly right behind my ear. So I had no discomfort at all. And again, the cable is soft, but it rolls up very nicely. It doesn't, it's not stiff, and it doesn't get crazy. So the cable is awesome for the $129 price. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to sound. Okay, so let's talk about the overall sound signature of the BQEYZ Summer. The BQEYZ Summer has a V-shaped sound signature. So you've got elevated treble, recessed mids, and elevated bass. One thing that's really cool about the Summer is its extension. It has really good extension on both ends, in the treble frequencies and in the bass frequencies. So if you look a little closer at the graph, starting in the upper treble, what you're going to see is pretty decent presence in the upper treble range. And again, that's your air. So if you're listening to live recordings, a lot of those air frequencies kind of fall in those frequencies above 10K. What you're going to see is a small spike right at around 18K, another spike at around 16K, and then it comes down a little bit, and then it jumps back up. And as you're coming towards 10K, it starts to sharply rise. And past 10K, you have a peak at 8K, and it's a pretty substantial peak. And of course, when you've got that peak at the 8K, that whatever instruments or tones fall within that frequency, that area, it's going to push those forward. And as you know, sometimes that 8K peak can be a little bit taxing on some during long listening sections. So moving past that 8K peak, what you're going to see is a drop, and then you have a small bump at around 4K, another a little bit of a bigger bump at around 2K. Past 2K, the mids are going to start to recess. Again, you've got that V shape, so you've got fairly recessed mids. The mids bottom out right at around 1K, and then it kind of stays between 1K down to around, I think 800 hertz or so. It starts to go back up, and so you've got the lower mids that start to elevate, and even more elevated in the bass. And then it slowly, once you get past the bass frequencies into the sub bass, it starts to kind of decline a little bit. But again, you have really good bass extension. So again, when you have those V-shaped sound signatures, what that's going to do is any instruments or vocals that fall within that frequency range, they're going to be pushed back just a tad. And I did notice that it seems like female vocals were slightly ahead of male vocals. Okay, well, let's dive in a little bit deeper. We're going to look a little closer at the treble, mids, and bass. Okay, so just to remind you, you've got three different types of drivers in the summer. You've got the piezoelectric handling the treble, the BA drivers handling the mids, and the dynamic driver handling the bass. So, and as you know, different types of drivers handle timbre better than others. Usually the dynamic drivers sound the most natural. So instrument timbre sounds the best typically on a dynamic driver, whereas sometimes with a BA driver or an electrostat driver or a piezo driver, they can tend to sound, instruments and voices can tend to sound a little unnatural. And with the piezoelectric ceramic drivers, sometimes the treble frequencies can sound a little thin and a little brittle. And I did notice that I've got several different types of IEMs, and of course I always like to compare. It actually seems like they did a pretty decent job implementing the piezoelectric drivers. The Spring 2, I remember actually they did a really good job with that too. I loved the Spring 2. And now another defining attribute with the piezoelectric ceramic drivers is they're fast. They've got they've got an ability to kind of rebound. And so when you have a fast driver, a lot of times that will kind of manifest itself in kind of bringing out more detail, better detail retrieval. And I definitely noticed that in the summer, the detail retrieval and the clarity in the treble is very good. But I also did notice that some of the treble frequencies did not sound perfectly natural. I noticed it in there were some live recordings where the drummer is playing the ride, and the ride in these recordings has a little bit of a warmer, kind of thicker tone to it. You can tell that he's probably playing with wooden sticks, and it's probably just a big ride, and it has a little bit of weight to the strikes when he hits it. And that is evident when you're on a good set of IEMs. You can hear the weight of those sticks, and you can really hear some of the lower frequencies in the cymbal. And there is a range of frequencies in cymbals, believe it or not. They're not just all really high. But now, and I noticed that when I'm listening to that same recording, and that was Jazz at the Pawn Shop, that's one I use all the time, it just seemed like his cymbals and the ride in particular seemed a little thin and a little brittle, a little frail. Now, that's not to say that everything sounded like that. For the most part, it wasn't something that I really noticed, especially the more I kind of listened to it, it started to kind of not bother me as much. And again, I think also, again, it depends on the recording. It depends on what you're listening to. But for that particular recording, I did notice it. Now, again, I talked about the Summer's ability to pull out detail in those upper treble frequencies. You've got that spike those two little spikes that I talked about past 10K at 16K and 18K. And of course, we know that those frequencies past 10K are whenever you're listening to a live recording, or if there's any kind of air or atmosphere in a recording, that's where you're gonna hear a lot of that atmosphere and air is in those upper treble frequencies. And to be honest with you, based on the graph, it seemed like I would have had a little more air presence. It was there, but it wasn't as much, as pronounced as I expected it to be. But overall, the treble frequencies are good. It's not my favorite type of treble, but it still actually sounded good. I did prefer the treble of the Spring 2 over the Summer. Now as far as sound stage and imaging and instrument placement, the sound stage is actually pretty wide. I would say a little bit above average. So you've got good, a nice wide sound stage. Again, Hoff Ensemble is a recording that I use a lot. That sounded really, really good. And there's also pretty good forward depth in the sound field also. Instrument placement was good. It was not, the instruments weren't super dense, but you could definitely tell where they were. They did have a fairly defined space within the sound field. So the imaging was quite good. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the mids. Okay, so as you're moving out of the lower treble into the upper mids, what you're going to see, and again, in the treble frequencies, you had that 8K peak. So that was a pretty substantial peak. So once you move past that 8K peak, you have a sharp decline, and it bottoms out right at around 5K. Then it starts to go back up. You have a bump at 4K, and then a little bit of a bigger bump at around 2K. Past 2K, it starts to decline a little bit. It bottoms out. The mids bottom out at around 1,000 hertz, around 1K. And it stays about the same between 1K and 700 hertz. Past 700 hertz, it starts to go back up. So those lower mids start to elevate. So going back to that 4K and that 2K bump, I think, and I talked about how it seemed like the female vocals were slightly more forward than male vocals. Just a little bit. For the most part, it wasn't even something I really even noticed. It was only on specific recordings. And again, now these mids are overall compared to the where the bass frequencies are and the treble frequencies are. These mids are fairly recessed. So for the most part, especially I noticed it in male vocals, again, it seemed to be pushed back a little bit. Even like trumpets, trombones, the mid frequencies in guitars, acoustic guitars, pianos. It seemed like they seemed to be pushed back a little bit. Even drums and some of the mid frequencies in the drums, the toms, seemed to be pushed back just a little bit. Now again, I don't know where the piezoelectric drivers stop and where that crossover point is between the piezoelectric ceramic drivers and the BA drivers are. But it does seem like as the lower the frequencies are in that lower treble, upper mids, instruments start to sound more natural. Male vocals actually sound really natural. Female vocals sounded natural for the most part. All the instruments, trumpets, pianos, guitars sounded really, really natural. So the BA drivers actually are doing a really good job as far as the tonal qualities of instruments and vocals. Yeah, as far as clarity is good. Detail retrieval in the mids is good. It's not great. I would say it's about average. But overall, those BA drivers, I think, are doing a good job handling those mid frequencies. And again, as you get past that 700 hertz point, it starts to increase some. So you've got those elevated lower mids that kind of give a little more warmth to the lower male vocals, give a little more depth to toms and deeper tuned like a rock snare. And I like warm sound signatures, so I like that little elevation in the lower mids. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the bass. Okay, so the bass is actually my favorite part of the tuning of the summer. The Spring 2, I like almost everything else about the Spring 2. I prefer the treble, the mids, the design, even had a better fit and comfort for me with the Spring 2. However, again, I prefer the bass of the summer over the Spring 2. The Spring 2 is probably my favorite overall BQEYZ release. But again, I really like the dynamic driver. This is a well-implemented dynamic driver bass in the summer. Again, so we talked about past the 700 hertz point, you've got the frequencies start to go up. So you have the lower mid start to increase, the mid bass starts to go up even more. It increases through the bass, and it actually peaks out in the sub bass right at around 50 or 40 hertz. And then past that, it starts to drop off just slightly. Again, this has really good extension all the way down to 20 hertz. And it doesn't drop off much past that 40 hertz point. So going back to the elevated mids and the mid bass, of course, what that's going to do is add a little warmth to the overall sound signature. So toms, floor toms are going to have that nice warm deep tone to them. Deeper tuned snares are going to have that depth to them. Lower male vocals, upright basses, some of the even electric basses, any kind of mid bass frequencies are going to be slightly more forward. I did notice that there was a little bit of bass bleed. That was the only thing. I'm not sure where the BA drivers leave off and the dynamic driver takes over, but I'm not sure where that crossover point is, but I did notice, again, a little bit of bass bleed into the lower mids. Beyond that, though, I actually like the bass level. I think it's actually almost just right where I like it. And now as far as texture, speed, and layering, it is a dynamic driver, so that's not always going to be the best. But the bass, what it does do very well is it has excellent slam, excellent punch, and really good rumble. Again, you've got that really good extension in the sub frequencies, so you've got lots of really good rumble. And overall, I would just say it's a well-controlled bass and sub bass. Again, overall, just a well-implemented dynamic driver bass. Okay, so I like the summer a lot, but again, the Spring 2 still remains my favorite BQEYZ release. But again, that's a $169 IEM. This is only $129. So really, for the price, this is an excellent IEM. I love the design. I did have the issues with the fit at first, but once I found tips that worked, that wasn't much of an issue at all. They're light, they're comfortable. Again, the design is quite nice. The cable is very, very nice for the price. So I think this is a super solid release by BQEYZ at the $129 price range. So I want to say thanks to all of my subscribers, all of you that have kind of been sticking with me through this. I know I haven't been getting videos out as quickly as I had hoped I would. So I really appreciate your loyalty, and again, for you guys just being patient with me. Please like this video, please share this video. We'll see you next time.